This is The Oasis, your online active social impact salon. We've created this podcast so more people, and especially the social impact alumni, are motivated with new knowledge to continue to make a better society. It's a place to get info that'll help you contribute to and even facilitate social change. Here's your chance to gain new knowledge, form an opinion, be prompted by debate, and even be stimulated to act. These podcasts have an authentic feel and are recorded in relaxed environments like coffee shops, workplaces, and even on the street. So why not make this salon your regular social impact experience?
This is Lauren Webster, and I'm here with Tony Hagan and Louise Forrester, Head of Brand and People at Chorus, and we're here to discuss the three-way merger and their recent brand launch of Chorus, and really just keen to see what's new and innovating in the M&A space and the non-for-profit sector. So Louise is the perfect person to have a chat with. So here we go.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Tony.
Good to have you with us.
Excellent. So Louise, just to start off, could you tell us a little bit about how the three organizations, Volunteer Task Force, Community First, and Care Options, found each other and started to discuss merger interests?
So the three organisations who ended up merging and agreeing to merge in the middle of 2016 came to the conversations at different times. I think there was a few organisations led by boards and chairs who had talked about possibly merging, and very much a merger of equals, so looking for similar size, similar made-up organisations. So I was working at Care Options, and I joined in June 2016, and pretty much the first executive meeting we had, there was a merger on the table. But some of the other organisations had been talking for some time, and another organisation decided not to merge. So it was interesting, kind of 6 months leading up to that kind of more commitment stage in the middle of the year, leading up to the announcement of intention to merge in November 2016.
Great. So you've seen it right from inception all the way through to the fantastic launch that you've been having. So I guess in terms of relationships between the organizations, their CEOs and their boards, what was in place to kind of get this to work?
I think the merger and the success of the merger was definitely led by the three chairs. So Dr. Moira Watson was the chair of Volunteer Task Force, Andrea Hall, the chair of Community First, and Barbara Powell, the chair of Care Options. And those three women really drove and led the merger, obviously supported by their boards, but it really took a lot of time, and those three women formed an interim governance structure to kind of keep making decisions and progress and meeting weekly. And then there was a key management interim team, which was the three CEOs and a couple of project leads. So those two groups and structures really enabled us to move quite fast and make this happen.
What did the government or government agencies think of the merger?
So we spoke to the government agencies really very shortly before the announcement of the intention to merge in November, and just to ensure that that was something that they were going to be comfortable with. And the WA Department of Health are one of our bigger funders, and they were quite supportive. There has been a bit of consolidation in the sector in the last few years, and they're mindful that there'll be more to come. So they were appreciative of a conversation shortly beforehand, and have been very supportive. So I think it's a reality. These organisations are going to merge, so making sure it's supported, I think, is in government's interest.
Mm. And I guess in all the early kind of research and conversations, and imagine you kind of consulted very widely and vastly across the sectors. Was there anything that you took from corporate or any frameworks from other NFP examples or case studies or useful tools that you would say you would be happy to highlight?
I think we've used a number of people to support the journey. A number of tools and consultants have helped us along the way. But I think it's really come down to the culture programs that we've had, front and centre. And Care Options received an award for the culture work they did. And we've really tried to use the learnings from that forward with Chorus in how to engage with people across the organisation. And I guess make it feel like the merger is something everyone's part of, and it's not just something that's being done to people. So that real collaborative approach, and the real heavy on the communication, and not very top down. The decisions obviously have to be made at the top, but very much considering all parties.
That's an interesting point, and as you see around our sector, there's lots of different organisations that are emerging or changing their structure or being forced to change because of funding alterations. Did you take, or have the merged entity taken the opportunity to look at other organisational structures, decision-making processes, and decentralisation of self-working teams and those sorts of things?
Yeah, I think being a community care provider, we've definitely looked at those sorts of things. There's a provider in the Netherlands called Buurtzorg, and we're very interested in the work they do. They have about 16,000 people work for them, and they're in teams no more than 10 or 12. So we definitely like that model. It's a big shift to go from a fairly traditional structure to that in 1 or 2 steps. But we have a big project currently looking at human-centred design to redesign our organisation, our structure, and be more customer-centric and revolved around the customer. So I think we're at the beginnings of a journey like that, and maybe we'll be a Buurtzorg in the future, who knows. Yeah,
I think Buurtzorg is a shining light that a lot of people, a lot of organisations in Australia in particular are aspiring to either become or get part way along the continuum to that organisation and what they do and the way they act. And part of the discussion around that, and something that they're sort of famous for, is their KPI management. Obviously that would be part of any discussion and any changes to the way the organisation operates.
Absolutely, and it's quite unfamiliar territory for a lot of people that work in this sector. One of the organisations had worked with individual KPIs and had tracked people's time with customers and travel time and a few other kind of metrics. So we were starting to look at individual kind of KPIs and efficiencies and productivity. So we've kind of started to play in that space. I guess the most important thing for us is it's underlined by information technology infrastructure, and that's something we're grappling with at the moment. But the good thing about being in this merger is we kind of talk about ourselves as a 47-year-old startup. We've got history, but we're also starting from scratch in some ways. So we can build the organisation of the future and build the IT infrastructure to support that. So it's still going to take time, but we absolutely will look at having something that can help us measure, those sorts of KPIs when we move to that kind of structure.
Has it helped that, because one of the interesting situations with KPIs is trying to match it with culture, and you've said that Care Options had a very strong culture and brought that to the table. Is that something that people within the organisations are trying to get their head around, this, on the one hand, need for productivity and KPIs and efficiency and changes of work habits versus maintaining the culture and the mission and the focus?
Yeah, and interestingly, the model we use is the human synergistics model, and they've got a few different ways of looking at things, but they use a circumplex, which is like a clock face with 12 different kind of behaviours or approaches, like for each of the hours. And there's broken into 3 areas. There's the blue quadrant, or they're in 3, so whatever the 3 version of quadrant is. Not the blue area is the very constructive styles, and that's what we're aiming for. The red styles are quite aggressive, and the green styles are quite passive aggressive. The good thing about the blue styles is they are positive culture for efficiency and for performance. And that's what I really like about the human synergistics model. It's not just culture for culture's sake. Let's all just pat each other on the back and have a great time. It's let's create the culture and the environment for optimal performance. So the culture program we have fits perfectly with performance and efficiency, and it doesn't avoid conflict. We embrace conflict. We just have those really constructive conversations, and I think it goes hand in hand with the communication style we have, which is share all the pieces of information. If all of your staff and volunteers understand what we're grappling with, increased customer demands and probably price competitiveness and less government funding, then we can all kind of brainstorm and say, well, how can we do this? How can we do it more efficiently and more effectively? So involve everyone, but also culture is not just about hugs. It's about, having a really great working environment.
What kind of interesting things are you guys doing in terms of building that trust with your stakeholders and with the internal teams that are a bit unique and different?
Again, going back to the learnings from the culture program, I think it's really about listening to people, talking to people, valuing their input, and having the time to collaborate. Obviously, it's generally more expensive and time-consuming to collaborate, but the outcomes are generally much higher in value, and you have more efficient kind of results. So sometimes spending the money and time up front to collaborate will give you a better result. So it really has come down to having a merge with momentum has been one of our phrases, but to have enough collaboration to make people ensure people feel they're on the journey with you.
I'm going to ask a question that may have been appropriate to ask right at the start. Why was it important to merge?
It's a tough one. I think there's a boring element that is the three organisations would probably not have survived in the medium or certainly not the long term alone as they were. So there's purely a survival element. But I think the three chairs and the boards and the organisations, and especially the volunteers, very volunteer based, very passionate, very driven. I think there was a real thought that we could do more together. We were stronger and we could make a bigger difference and impact on the community as one. Things like investing in research or investing in piloting new ways of working. When you're on, a shoestring, it's really hard to invest in those extra things. Whereas if you pool the capital and pool the resources of three organisations and try and create something newer and fresher and responding to contemporary society, then I think there was a real understanding that we could do more, we could be more.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess it really helps that the three organisations come to that realisation about medium to long-term survival very quickly. Yeah. Because those facts of life are important, around board tables for board members to understand and understand perhaps the future scenarios of where the sector's going and where funding's going and the need for organisations to evolve and whether that's evolving on their own or evolving with others. It's important.
I think it was really a proactive measure on behalf of the boards and the Australian Institute of Company Directors in their 2015 survey of not-for-profit organisations. There was a huge percentage of those organisations talking about mergers or partnerships or collaborations, but very few actually doing it. So I think what's probably different about these three organisations is they started talking about it and then they actually did it. And it's not easy work, but it does pay off.
Action, it's great. And Lou, just lastly, is there anything that you'd like to say to the sector in terms of people that are thinking of taking on this type of a merger strategy or taking on this journey?
I think just ensure there's some clear boundaries set up with who's responsible for what and how that's going to work. The couple of governance structures that I talked about earlier really helped decisions get made and action get taken. And without that, I think it could stall. Obviously, relationships are really important, and having clear and consistent communication as well. But you need to build that structure about how a decision is going to be made and how this is going to progress. Otherwise, it could just be a conversation for a very long time.
Thank you for sharing that. Lou, it's been great to talk with you and Tony, and we really look forward to watching Chorus. The brand's fantastic, and to keeping the conversation going to see what other innovations you guys get up to. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Well, that's a wrap for this episode of The Oasis. I hope you enjoyed it. Look forward to you joining us next time.